In the early morning of March 1st, 1996, in Riverhead, New York, the family of 17-year-old Curtisha Morning had been up for hours in agony. Curtisha left home on February 29th to go to school and she never returned. Curtisha was a senior at Riverhead High School. A little after 1 o'clock a.m. on March 1st, Curtisha's mother reported her missing to the police. Around 6 o'clock that morning, Curtisha's family began contacting her friends to see if they knew where she was. One of the first people they contacted was Curtisha's close friend, 18-year-old Kalila Taylor. Curtisha's sisters went to Kalila's house to ask if she knew where Curtisha was, but Kalila and her mother told them that they didn't know where she was. Curtisha had a bright future ahead of her. She was a homecoming queen and was described by the school's faculty as a beautiful young girl and a great student. While still in high school, Curtisha was also pursuing her nursing aid certificate from the BOCES Technical Center, which was located right next door to Riverhead High School. She had dreams of becoming a nurse and going to medical school. Curtisha's love life was also blossoming when earlier that year she started a new relationship with a 22-year-old man named Carl Brown. A seemingly happy teenager who was just starting to live her life is now missing without a trace. On Thursday, February 29th, 1996, the day Curtisha never made it back home, she was invited to speak at the BOCES Technical Center at their new student orientation. Curtisha spoke about the experience in the nursing aid program. She completed her speech a little after 10 a.m. She headed back to her high school around 10:25 a.m., but unfortunately, she never made it back to Riverhead High School. Initially, the police department handled the situation as if Curtisha was a possible runaway. From speaking to Curtisha's mother, her classmates, and the school faculty, the police determined that it seemed she was happy with her life, and there was also nothing in her background that would suggest she wanted to run away. She had a loving family, she had many friends, she was popular, she was a homecoming queen, she was a senior in high school, and she was thriving in her nursing aid program. She didn't have any documented behavioral issues, so the police department quickly began to think that this was more than just a teenage girl who ran away. On the afternoon of March 1st, 1996, a woman walking in the woods between Riverhead High School and the BOCES Center found a backpack and a bag full of nursing clothes. That backpack was determined to belong to Curtisha. When Curtisha's backpack was found, the story spread to the local media, and that invoked fear into the whole community. Several local news outlets were reporting on the mysterious disappearance of Curtisha Morning. Over the next several days, Curtisha's family, the police department, and Curtisha's friends, including Kalila Taylor and her family, put missing persons flyers around the town of Riverhead. There were several searches done by the police department, and in many of those searches, they utilized canines, but nothing positive came from those searches. She was still missing without a trace. On March 20th, 1996, after Curtisha had been missing for 3 weeks, the local police department contacted the Suffolk County Homicide Division. The local police informed Suffolk County Homicide that Curtisha had been missing for 3 weeks, and they felt that she probably would not be found alive. On March 25th, 5 days after the Suffolk County Homicide Division was contacted, Curtisha was found. In the evening of March 25th, a babysitter brought two boys to play on the running track at Riverhead High School. While the children were playing, the woman decided to walk around. While she was walking, she saw a leather jacket in the woods under some leaves. She went to pick up the jacket, and she discovered the body of Curtisha Morning under the jacket. When the police arrived on scene, they determined without a doubt that this was a homicide. Curtisha's body was covered in stab wounds. Cortesha had a stab wound through her cheek. There were multiple stab wounds to the top of her head and multiple stab wounds to the back of her neck. Cortesha also had defensive wounds on her hands and arms. This was clearly a savagely brutal attack. A few feet away from Cortesha, they found an earring that matched the earring that she was currently wearing, and they also found a silver necklace. Surprisingly, Cortesha's body was found in an area that the police had already searched. She was found in the area where she was last seen, between Riverhead High School and the Bosey Center. These two campuses were within yards of each other. The police justified not finding her body previously because, number one, around the time that they were searching, it was snow on the ground, and essentially they figured it was snow on top of Cortesha as well. Number two, they said that the dogs they used in the multiple searches were trained to find human bodies that were alive. They said they were not cadaver dogs. When the autopsy was conducted the next day, the medical examiner counted between 94 and 96 separate wounds on Cortesha's body. The medical examiner said there was no single stab wound that killed her. It was the totality of all the stab wounds and the trauma to her body that killed her. After the detectives received the results of the autopsy, they believed that by the amount of stab wounds Cortesha had, it must have been someone she knew. They believed a stranger would not stab someone 90 plus times. They believed that just by the vicious nature of the attack, it had to have been someone she knew and someone who was very angry with her. They figured there was some sort of emotional attachment between the perpetrator and the victim. Almost immediately, the detectives began to receive several phone calls stating that this could possibly be the result of a lover's triangle. Several people told the detectives about a boyfriend that Cortesha had, who was the very recent ex-boyfriend of Cortesha's friend, Kalila Taylor. The detectives then found out that Carl Brown was also the father of Kalila's 2-year-old son. Kalila Taylor came from a normal working-class family. She also attended Riverhead High School and she graduated a year before Cortesha. The girls knew each other their entire lives. Cortesha and Kalila's mothers became close friends when they were in high school. They continued their friendship into adulthood and they raised their daughters together. Their families were extremely close. When Kalila was in school, she was involved in extracurricular activities such as band and the dance team, but her passion was singing. Kalila sang in her church choir, but soon her focus changed. In her early teenage years, she started going to parties, and she was involved in what many people would call typical teenage drama. Kalila was involved in many physical fights. Her mother said the reason why Kalila fought so much was because a lot of girls were jealous of her. Kalila's party days came to an abrupt pause when at 16 years old, she announced to her family that she was pregnant. 16-year-old Kalila was pregnant by a 19-year-old young man named Carl Brown. Kalila and Carl began dating when she was 14 years old. They did not have a steady relationship. They would break up and get back together, break up, and get back together again. In February 1994, Kalila gave birth to her son, but that did not stop her from finishing high school. She graduated in June of 1995, and she also received a nursing aid certificate from the Bose's Technical Center. At 18 years old, in December of 1995, Kalila moved into her own apartment with her son. In January of 1996, she allowed her son's father, Carl Brown, to move in with her. But after only 2 weeks of living together, Kalila and Carl got into a huge fight and Carl moved out. Shortly after Carl moved out, Kalila was unable to pay her rent and she moved back home with her mother. A few weeks after Carl moved out of Kalila's apartment, she found out that Carl had started a new relationship with someone else. That someone else was Kalila's close friend, Curtisha Morning. Many people were aware that Kalila had very negative feelings towards Curtisha for dating Carl. There were at least 2 occasions where Kalila confronted Curtisha and Carl in public, which led to very heated arguments between the three. When the investigators pulled Kalila's police record, they saw that she had been on probation for assault. The incident happened 2 years prior in 1994, and it involved Kalila using a knife in a fight. The detectives spent the next 2 days conducting extensive interviews at Riverhead High School. They spoke with 3 people who remembered seeing Curtisha the day she disappeared while she was walking back to Riverhead High School. A PE teacher, a teacher's aide, and a girlfriend of one of the school's employees said that on the morning of February 29th, they saw Curtisha arguing with a girl who looked like Kalila Taylor. The detectives also spoke to Carl Brown. They asked Carl why did he and Kalila break up. Carl explained that he and Kalila had a really big argument that turned violent and Kalila stabbed him. He told the detectives that the stab wound wasn't serious and he didn't feel the need to report it to the police. On April 4th, 1996, the investigators spoke with Kalila Taylor. They went to Kalila's job at Wendy's and brought her back to the police station for questioning. While talking to the detectives, Kalila repeatedly denied having anything to do with Curtisha's murder. Kalila told the detectives that she and Curtisha were close friends. She explained how she did Curtisha's hair for prom the previous year, and she said she had no problems with Curtisha dating Carl because she was done with him. She also said that there was no way she could have killed Curtisha because on February 29th, between 10:30 a.m. and 11 a.m., she would have been on her way to work. After 6 hours of speaking with Kalila, they let her go. But the detectives did observe some cuts on Kalila's hands. The cuts were healed and appeared to be weeks old, so they took some pictures of her hands and a sample of her DNA. The detectives continued to comb through Kalila's background. While searching Kalila's police records, the investigators found reports where Kalila was deemed the aggressor and was accused of slashing a girl with a razor blade. But they also found a report regarding another fight where Kalila was hurt pretty bad. During this fight, in October of 1995, Kalila was stabbed and ended up in the hospital. During her time in the hospital, the officers took pictures of her and her injuries. While the current detective was looking at those old pictures of her injuries, he saw that Kalila was wearing a silver necklace, a necklace that looked very similar to the necklace that was found near Curtisha's body. The detectives went to a jeweler who was very experienced in jewelry comparisons. He asked the jeweler if he could compare the necklace in the photos to the necklace that was found near Curtisha's body. The jeweler said yes, he could do that. While the jeweler was examining the photos and the necklace, the jeweler found certain defects and points of damage that were identical to each other. The jeweler determined that it was the same necklace. The detectives felt that they were on the right track with pursuing Kalila, but without a murder weapon, an eyewitness, or a confession, the detectives felt they didn't have enough evidence to charge Kalila. In the months after Cortesha was found, the community was aware that Kalila was the number one suspect in Cortesha's murder. That accusation ended the long-time friendship between the families of Cortesha and Kalila. There were reports of many verbal altercations between the families. In the spring of 1997, a little over a year after Cortesha's death, Kalila tried to live a normal life and raise her son. She had a new job working with disabled children, but soon that would all come to an end. The detectives finally received the results of the DNA comparison from the blood on Cortesha's clothing and the DNA they took from Kalila during her questioning. Those results were very damaging. The results showed that Kalila's DNA was found in the blood that was on Cortesha's shirt, her pants, and her boots. On June 9th, 1997, the Suffolk County Police Department arrested Kalila for the murder of Cortesha. On August 25th, 1999, Kalila's trial began. 22-year-old Kalila Taylor was charged with second-degree murder. During the trial, the prosecutor made sure to display Kalila's history of stabbing people and using razor blades in multiple fights. In addition to that, those 3 witnesses all took the stand and testified that the person they saw arguing with Cortesha on the morning she went missing looked like Kalila. The jeweler also testified that the necklace found near Cortesha was the same necklace he saw Kalila wearing in those police photographs. Lastly, the prosecutor presented the results of the DNA test, which proved that Kalila's DNA was found in the blood on Cortesha's clothing. Kalila's attorneys argued that the investigators did not do a thorough investigation. The defense argued that Cortesha could have been abducted and then discarded back in that area because there had been multiple searches of that exact area, and she was not found until 3 weeks later. The defense argued that she couldn't have been there the whole time. On September 28th, Kalila testified on her own behalf and said the police were setting her up. She said that the police bought that necklace and planted it near Cortesha's body. She also said she knows why her DNA was on Cortesha's clothing. According to Kalila, about a month before Cortesha went missing, she and Cortesha were both at the Riverhead Central Hospital. Kalila said she was there being treated because she had a fight, and Cortesha was there visiting her mother. Kalila said they spoke to each other in some way. Her blood must have got on Cortesha's clothes. She also said Cortesha must have been wearing those same clothes the day she went missing. After the jury deliberated, they found Kalila guilty of second-degree murder, and she received a sentence of 25 years to life. Less than 5 years later, in April of 2004, the New York Court of Appeals overturned Kalila's conviction on a technicality. It is reported that the reason the conviction was overturned was because the trial judge incorrectly instructed the jury regarding the DNA evidence. While the prosecutor and defense attorneys were preparing their cases, Kalila began writing letters to everybody who was involved in the case. She made some extremely bizarre statements in those letters. She claimed she was pregnant with a lizard. She said the police had a machine that made clones. She said Cortesha wasn't murdered. It was actually her clone who died. And she also said the detective who handled her case had a death machine where he could kill people and bring them back to life. Many people felt Kalila was setting the stage for an insanity plea. In 2005, Kalila was evaluated and deemed incompetent to stand trial. She was then sent to a psychiatric hospital. 5 years later, in 2010, she was finally deemed competent. The court decided to offer her a plea bargain of 16 years to avoid having to put Curtisha's family through the agony of having to go through a second trial. Kalila refused the deal. Kalila's mother and her attorney urged her to take the deal, but she decided to go to trial. On June 11, 2012, Kalila's second trial began. 16 years after the death of Curtisha Morning, her family was plagued with another trial. The same evidence was argued in court, and on July 2nd, 2012, Kalila was found guilty again and received the same sentence of 25 years to life.